morning. I'll call the meeting to order. This meeting is being recorded live and streaming on the District of Summerland YouTube channel. All representations to council, written or verbal, will form part of the public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. Members of the public are encouraged to register their name and civic address in advance of the meeting for the public comment opportunity found under items 6 and 9 by emailing corporateofficer@summerland.ca. Those who have not registered in advance but wish to provide public comments may call the District of Summerland conference line at 1-877-385-4099 and enter the participation access code 7382948 during the live meeting. And we'll move on to the corporate officer. Any introduction of late items?
Thank you, Mayor. We do actually have one item to add prior to adopting the minutes of September 28th. So that is a recommendation to amend a resolution from September 28th.
Okay. And then to the adoption of the agenda, any amendments to the agenda?
There is, Your Worship. So item 7.1 is being deferred.
Okay. And so we'll move on to number 4, adoption of the minutes.
Your Worship, can we pass that resolution?
Yeah, we'll have to pass. We'll have to discuss the resolution. So we all got a copy of this as a late item.
Your Worship, we can adopt the agenda as amended first.
Yeah, unless we want to have a discussion on the amendment. Does anybody want to discuss, bring that forward?
I'll move to we adopt the agenda.
As amended?
As amended.
Okay. Second? All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Okay, and then motion to adopt the minutes as amended. So that's amended on the list, right?
Correct. So just to speak to,
Sure.
Can I ask anyone who's on the phone to please mute your speaker? Thank you. So, Your Worship, just to mention, the amendment is to resolution number 2021-28. It was the application for a grant from the ICIP Rural and Northern Communities Program, and staff were reading the best practices and are asking that Council amend that resolution by putting in the words "as well as any cost overruns funded through the Electrical Capital Reserve."
And anybody have any questions on this? I do actually, if you don't mind. When we were discussing this matter, it was raised, I think Councilor Barkwell raised it, that about whether this project was scalable or not. And so that if we found that we were kind of running over budget, we could scale it back. This amendment seems to suggest that might not be an opportunity to do that. I just wonder if we could get some clarification.
So my understanding is that because we had a firm number, it doesn't mean that we don't have the ability to scale the project depending on what the costs are. It just means that when we put an actual number in there, the grant application wants to know that if for some reason we're over 10,000 or 5,000, that the district is still supporting it. And I understand that's the reason for putting in that little that piece after that.
Councilor Patrick.
Thank you, Worship. Is there any ways, to our corporate officer, is there any way we can set a figure to it that we don't leave a carte blanche, wide open budget for overruns?
Just to, as part of that, I think the project is approved by council and the cost of the project is approved by council. So if there are any overruns or if the project is going over budget, it will have to come to council for approval. So therefore, anything that might be a cost overrun would first have to be approved by council.
Okay, thank you. If there's no other questions, if somebody would like to bring that forward. Councillor Carlton, as amended. Yeah. Second by Councillor Barkwell. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Okay, item 5, delegations, the Rotary Club and Giants Head Grind. We have Ellen Walker-Matthews on teleconference, I believe. Ellen, are you there?
Yes, you did.
Yeah, okay.
I sure am. And I think Linda Van Alphen has called in as well.
Okay.
She's the president and chair of the Rotary Club. So thank you very much, council, for allowing us to join the meeting today. It's always strange when you're doing it on the phone and you can't see everyone's face, but I'm envisioning you all there. So I guess this goes back to sometimes to a concept that we've had brewing around I don't, are you ready for me to speak?
Yes, carry on, you're doing great.
Okay. Around the idea of lighting up the ride as part of light up festivities. We've had some discussion around it as a club and as an organization, the Giants Head Drive. And this year with light up not taking place because of COVID, we thought this might be more than a better year to try and kickstart this initiative if we had support from council, obviously, and the desire to go forward. So our vision, and again, it's still a vision, and I would like to spend some time speaking with Martin and the Public Works Office, but would be to sell lights for the grind through the month of November and even into December to light the grind up for the winter season. And we would take on the cost of the lights. We would take on the cost of even supporting through the labor costs for having those put up by Martin's team. But we would also sell them as a fundraising initiative on which once we've had expenses and revenue, we would split it as we've done before with money going towards the upgrade of the ground and the other half going to cancer, to Rotary. We see it as a great way to kind of say we're still lit up for the community. It's still an important part of what Summerland has been about for the last 31 plus years. And yet it won't necessarily draw all crowds at one time. It would be something to visually represent Summerland light up, so light up the ground. We do have a line on a variety of lights that and costing that's going on right now by one of the members of the Rotary Club. And we don't have yet a budget in place, but we know we have to flex this program. What we wanted to do before we started to have any other conversation, with those that would, with the city that would have to be involved, is to see what the council thought about the concept. So really today we're asking for you to endorse the concept of it, and then we would come back in 2 weeks with sort of more information, pricing, what it would look like. Obviously having, no cost to the city. If the city wished to put in some in kind with labor, that would be great, but we really would take this on as an initiative by the Giants Head Grind and the Rotary Club to do something that might be a little bit uplifting this year and make people feel good about winter as we move into an unusual season and no light up festivities. And that is really the basis of why I'm here today. I'm certainly open to questions. Again, it's a concept at this point that does need further discussion. We've had some dialogue again amongst ourselves about position of the lights and how they would go on and what we would do. Obviously, the best concept would be that they would go on weekly over days as we grew the sun, so people could see it kind of creep up the mountain. The lights go up the mountain as we started to get momentum on fundraising would be the ideal, with it obviously being all lit up at some point in hopefully before Christmas, and in a perfect world, hopefully before what would traditionally be light up night, but that may not be as fast as we could sell all the lights. And just have something that was a bit uplifting for the community.
Okay, thank you, Ellen. I think a couple of councillors have some questions. Councillor Barton?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. This is the first I've heard of this idea, and I don't really have a picture of what you are planning to do. Are you talking about putting lights all up the trail of Giant's Head? Putting power to light the trail that would be used for the grind, or solar lights or something, or just selling individual lights?
It would be to light up the grind route, would be the ideal destination for the light. It wouldn't be to do the grind specifically, it would be for the winter months, more to light it up as something as a visual effect. I mean, obviously, if people wanted to do the grind in the evening, I guess that would give an opportunity to do it in the darker hours, but it was more for a visual look of the grind.
So you would run a power line up the side of the mountain to light all these lights?
Our goal would be a generator. We have looked at solar power, but I don't think that we will have enough capacity sunlight for that to actually work. So it would have to be done through a generator.
Do you have a budget yet, or just still conceptual?
So I like that. In the next 2 weeks, we would have a budget, and that we would, it's our belief that we have sufficient funds to be able to cover that budget, and we would also do it as a fundraising activity. So people would be buying the lights as opposed to just being a direct expense to the grind, but it would be covered by and large by the funds that we have. We think our budget would be able to cover it all.
Okay, thank you. That's my question.
Okay, Councillor Trainer.
Hi, Ellen. This is Councillor Trainer here. I really like this idea. I've never heard of it before, and I think it would be really neat. It's never been done. It's ambitious, and so I'm looking forward to hearing how you guys think you can pull this off. But I think if you can, it would be really, really cool, and I think it would be an attraction for people. The only thing is that the grind route itself does get pretty slippery during the winter time. So maybe if that doesn't work out, you could also consider doing it along the road. That's just another thought, but yeah, I think it's a really great idea. So I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with.
And absolutely, the road is an alternative for sure. So, and for this year in particular, where it is an ambitious goal, it might be the best. It might be the best way to go. But yes, definitely that's consideration, and either one works. I mean, it's still lighting up the grind and lighting up Giant's Head Mountain, which I think would be unique and something, a great story for the town, quite frankly.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Carlson.
Thank you. I have, I guess it's a question as well. When you mentioned this idea, I was also, as Councillor Barkwell, have no idea what this would look like, but then I Googled it, and Cypress Mountain and Grouse Mountain also both have different light walks. One is called Lights to the Lodge, and the other one is called the Light Walk, and there's some pretty fancy light installations. I'm wondering if that is sort of the inspiration in what you're envisioning, or if it's something that would be more like strings of Christmas lights or big globes, or and if they're temporary, they come down afterwards and then they're down for the spring and summer months.
So that's a great question. Yes, I know, I'm familiar with Cypress and what they've done, and they're pretty spectacular. They're also coming at a massive budget. That may be a future goal, but at the moment, our thought was that it would be straight strings, or following the grind, strings of light, white light up the grind that would, show it to the town as people looked up the mountain at night. That it would grow over the days as we were selling the light, so you would kind of see it grow every week, so that the lighting would start low and move up to the very top as we achieved our goal, which I think we could do, and then take it down, as you say, for spring and summer, at least in the initial stages of, and then if everyone falls in love with the idea, it could grow. But I mean, initially this year, it would be a lovely light installation, but very basic white light, like Christmas lights, or do you want to call them that, but white light up the trail, leading up the mountain. And yeah, the Cypress one would be fabulous. And I think they're going to do an installation like that at Big White this year, but they're quite quite expensive.
Yes, it looks expensive. So just to follow up on that then, this is the first that it's come to council, I'm wondering how quickly you are looking for some support and when you would hope to start putting some lights out.
So, another great question. I guess our goal today was to find out if there was any objection or major objection. If the council said you're interested in us exploring and proceeding further, we would bring a budget together for ourselves and an idea of timeline. Obviously, Public Works, which we would need to have assistance in this, and hopefully be able to cover up their costs as well. And if that was pulled together in the next 2 weeks, we would come back to council with where we were at with the plan and seek approval to start the project. So this is really a first step in seeing if there was any major objections or any concerns about going forward and exploring this further.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Alan, for your presentation over the phone. I think I find this is extremely exciting. I think it's an opportune time in the midst of COVID. I think without light up this year, I think there could be a lot of support from the local business community buying strings of lights and probably even public families and different people like that wanting to be involved in this project. I think it's exciting and just try to envision it in my head. These white lights just keep growing up the side of the mountain. So thank you for your thoughts and trying to make this go, but I think it's a wonderful idea. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Any other questions? No, I just have one, if I may. Would you, either for the grind trail or the road, have an idea what the sight lines might be of the lights from say downtown? Would you be able to see, or what part of town you'd actually be able to see the trails, the lights snaking up the mountain?
Yeah, specifically no, but I think that what we have seen before with even the shirts going up the mountain, I've got photography of when the grind is going on, it's quite incredible what you actually see going up the mountain when you see the shirts if you're standing in town. So I think I believe, and again, I'll get more information, but I think you'll see a pretty great sight line from town up the mountain of the light.
Okay, that's great, thanks. So, I mean, what I'm hearing, I think, around the table is that there's not really any objection in principle. People seem pretty positive. There's just some questions regarding logistics maybe, but I don't know, I think it'd be quite an exciting project.
Great. Well, thank you very much for entertaining the discussion and for your questions and for, sort of helping see the vision. And as I say, we will be working diligently over the next few days to pull this together and come back to you with a final overview. But I really appreciate everybody taking the time to think about it and understand what we're trying to accomplish. So I think it could be quite a nice story for this year.
Yeah, thank you, Alan.
Thank you very much.
Oh, wait, we got one link question here. Councilor
Okay.
Blackwell.
My question is for the CEO, perhaps do you think it'd be appropriate to have a resolution directing staff to work with the Rotary Club on preparing a plan for next meeting?
Yes, I think that would be great, and then we can follow up with staff to make sure we can make it happen.
Okay, so move.
Seconder, Councilor Carlson. Any discussion on the motion? No? All in favor? That's carried unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we have another delegation from Unisys School, Roger Marino and Peter Chu. They're here. Just step up to the podium.
Okay,
Thank you.
good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Thank you for giving us the time today to share with you what's been happening up on the hill. First and foremost, on behalf of the board of Unisys, the teachers, the staff, and more importantly, the students and the families, I'd like to thank you. Thank you for your support, and thank you for giving time today for us to share with you this update. Over the last 3 years since our acquisition of Glenford and the restart of the school up on Pierre Drive. We have provided regular updates to council regarding our progress, and we're happy to do so again today, and also share with you our thoughts going forward in the future in terms of growth aspirations. Before I get too far, I'd like to introduce my partner in crime, Roger Marino, who's the head of school. He'll share a little bit of a history about himself and then talk through kind of where we are. And I'll wrap up with a quick 2-minute introduction of our thoughts in terms of where we're going and what we would like to do, and obviously seek Mr. Mayor and Council, your guidance and comments and questions in terms of our thoughts on next growth plans for Unisys. Okay, so with that, I'll hand it over to Roger. And Roger, if you want to.
Good afternoon, and thank you. Just a little history about myself to give you the reason why I would want to be head of school at a boarding school. I'm an Italian-blooded French-Canadian who was sent to a boarding school in New Brunswick because of Bill 101 in Quebec. You weren't allowed to go and learn English. You had to go to French school. So I went to boarding school and I started at a young age of 12 years old. When I graduated, I said, this is what I want to do. And I've been doing it for my whole career, 30-year career. My brother lives in Penticton, and I used to come and visit. And I remember Glenford had closed. And I said, if they ever make it a boarding school, I want to be here and I want to be part of this great project. So love the Okanagan, love to be in this area. I'm really honored to be head of school at Unisys. At the present, we have about 110 students, plus 11 boarding students, international kids. And they did a big push at the school because of COVID-19. We had to do a big push towards getting our local population increased. And we're thrilled, from 25 to 30 kids last year to 110 has been a great growth. The matching program that we introduced with the academies has really had a positive impact on the population here, but not only here, but in Penticton, Peachland, and West Coast. As I said, the COVID impacted us a lot, and hopefully the borders will open at some point soon. We've been very safe with our kids. They did the quarantine for 14 days. And we keep them active every weekend, and they're really enjoying the school in the area. With that, we've increased our staff population quite drastically also, and we have approximately 35 staff overall, including teachers, many of them international. And I know that Peter will expand on a type of proposal, but it is important that we find some way to support them, and at Unisys we have plenty of room, so we're certainly looking to help them in that context. Anyway, I'm going to pass it on to Peter, and thank you for allowing me to speak to you about our school. It's going very well so far, knock on wood, and everyone's healthy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Roger. I like to, okay, I have my, so that was the slide that Roger talked to. I think one of the things that we're trying to do as a school here is really engage the community. Roger talked about the academies. We're working with the Okanagan Hockey Group to create a hockey academy, a skills academy. We're now sanctioned by Hockey Canada to provide a hockey academy here through the school. The whole concept is really to combine academics and athletics and create an environment where students can excel in both. Also working with Apex, the ski club up there, to create a ski team, hopefully in a few years, but we're working on the academies there as well. And then we're working with local providers of recreational activity like the bands and so forth. Really reaching out to the community and trying to create a school that is integrated into the community. So in terms of our next phase plan, before I get into it, I'd like to just share with Mr. Mayor and Council here that just a quick reminder that Unisys sits on 17 acres at the end of Pierre Drive. It's zoned institutional, and obviously there's, according to the OCP, there's a number of allow and permissible uses for this asset. I have to say that we have maybe utilized half of the asset at this point, and we think there's great potential to really use this asset to expand into something that it would contribute even more to the community and allow Unisys to grow. Just as a side note, the federal government, the Conference Board of Canada has some numbers I'd like to share with you before I get into the details of what we're thinking here is that international education is the third largest contributor to GDP export services in the country of Canada, only after natural resources and agricultural products. It creates over 200,000 jobs a year, and as you heard from Roger, we've created over 35 jobs associated with the school here. Now, these are all Canadian teachers who've traveled abroad and now have come home and want to find a job here. One of our biggest challenges, obviously, is staff housing. And share a personal note, I've been looking for a place to live in Summerland for the last 3 months, and I've not been successful. So continue to search. The thought process here really is as we expand the school and expand our outreach, when COVID is under control, we believe the international student population will grow. It is our intent to be a 50-50 ratio between domestic, local, Canadian resident kids, as well as international kids, to truly create what we call at Unisys the local perspective, but international horizons. And that's what we really want to do there. So as you can see in the map here on the 17 acres, we have phase 1, which is the academic building. That was the ex-Glenford building. And thank you for the approval 3 years ago for the dormitories. We now have phase 2A. I call it 2A because it's two buildings to the dormitories. We built phase 1. And now it's fully operational. We received our occupancy permit last summer, and it now houses a canteen and obviously recreation areas as well as dormitories for students. And then we're looking at how do we maximize this asset? How do we utilize this asset to create even more economic benefit, but more social benefit for the community? So here's our thoughts. And the base and the premise on our thoughts going forward really is where the District of Summerland is going in terms of its OCP. Your recent commission on affordable housing and looking at diverse housing and affordable housing in terms of what we can do in the community to encourage more settlement here. And really, Unisys is an innovator. We really want to think of ourselves as really doing something that is unique and innovative in not only the Valley, but across Canada and maybe globally. So that's the way we're thinking about it. And this slide basically just speaks to the fact that as we think about our future, we want to think about it in light of where Summerland is going and what the challenges are in Summerland. And that's what this chart speaks to. Our concept is really to create something called an intergenerational learning center. And that is really like we did with our academies, where we combine athletics and academics. Here with the Intergenerational Learning Center, we really want to harvest a tremendous dividend that I think Summerland has as a community, and huge potential there in terms of experience and wisdom of the senior generation that lives in the community, and the school that we're trying to create. So there's a lot of research on this. I have submitted as part of the submission here today, a document from the Stanford Center on Longevity, talking about the efforts worldwide on how they bring the two generations together and the benefits of marrying the two generations. And we feel that we're perfectly positioned here in Summerland and at Unisys to bring about this kind of concept together. Okay, and this concept is really to allow our seniors who are still active and very much want to become part of this community in more ways than one, and our students who really want to engage with more than just their parents and the teachers.
Join. This conference will end in 5 minutes.
Okay, I will speed up here.
Don't worry about that.
Okay. So the concept here is really to create spaces. It's important to emphasize spaces because spaces enable human interaction. And we want to create spaces that are encourages and promotes, if you will, the intergenerational learning. Kids today are so stuck to the computers. They ask Google for everything, but Google can't not tell you what the experience is. It can tell you what the information is, but it can't tell you it can't share with you the experience. And we think that's it's a tremendous dividend of this community that we can really harness and really let it grow. So the concept, and hopefully we're meeting with Anthony and Brad tomorrow, hopefully to get more insight in terms of what we can do with the asset we currently have. What do we need to do to create something like this? And the concept right now is really to create a spaces, and by I mean spaces, it'll be living and learning spaces combined together on a plot of the land here. If I go back just one slide, I'm sorry. On the lower part, which is serviced off of Cedar, at the end of Cedar in the cul-de-sac, serviced by all municipal services already, it is currently sitting idle. And we believe that this is a perfect location with the connection to the school to think about something like this. And at a high level, we do not have a lot of details yet, but we want to explore the parameters for us to take this concept forward. It will be the first in BC. In Alberta, there's been a couple of very successful cases of this type of development. And then globally, especially the United States and Northern Europe, there's been tremendous success. They have data supporting how it benefits both generations in many, many ways, in physical, psychological, emotional benefits to the people that are involved. And so this is the concept that we are proposing. In terms of today, wanted to give you an update and really just introduce the concept and maybe answer any questions you may have, seek your guidance and also your blessing as we move forward to explore this concept further. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Certainly, if you're wishing to pursue intergenerational learning, you probably come to the right place. Any questions? No? Nobody? Councilor Bartle.
Don't really have a question, but, I guess a comment would be, I love what you're suggesting and look forward to hearing more.
Thank you.
Councilor Van Elfen.
Thank you. No, I have to agree with my counterpart across the table. It sounds like exciting times up at Unisys. I mean, great idea, great concepts. I mean, yeah, the intergenerational concept is something you see in different cultures, but not so much in Canada. There's different nationalities up there. There's moms, dads, children, grandchildren, grandparents all living in the same place, and they all work together and help each other. And I mean, I just think this is along those lines educationally, and I'm excited to see where it goes. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just had a question regarding your phase 2 plans. Do you have any sort of timelines that you have in mind, and what impact do you think the pandemic will have on that?
Yeah, great question. I'll answer the question on timeline first. We are in high-level conceptual planning right now. I hope to be able to work with the administrators here to get to sort of what are the parameters for this project and get a yay or nay in terms of whether we could do something like this by the end of the year. I don't know if that's realistic, but for us, next summer would be a time to start building, next spring. So we like to really push this forward and get it going. Now, obviously, that's going to be all dependent on your second question, which is the impact of COVID and the pandemic. I think what we have, all the studies are out there, obviously not conclusive, but all the studies out there are saying that the young actually are less susceptible in terms of physical impact, and obviously the elders are more impacted by this. And we would have to create spaces that allow that social distancing and that healthy, those considerations to health before all else. So obviously that's going to put, like it did with our international students, we had over 35 committed students that were going to come in here. That would have generated a lot of excitement with the community, and they're all on hold because the borders are closed. So hopefully by the time that a vaccine is available and pandemic comes under control, we would be well into our building stages in anticipation that once we, pandemic's under control, that this project would go ahead.
Thank you. Councilor Malcolm.
one more important question. How are you making out with the hockey academy?
We have 20 kids, close to 20 kids. Yeah, it was really surprising. Andy Oakes, president of the OHG, was a strong supporter. They had tremendous experience internationally working in Austria with a school where they created a hockey academy, and the results were amazing. And, for many years, they had tried to approach Glenford. They have a program with Penn High right now, and they're trying to approach a school that has the boarding to bring in, obviously, a good mix of the international and the local. What we're finding is that whenever you have students from different backgrounds, everybody benefits. And so the Hockey Academy, we have our scheduling in such a way that academics happen in the morning and then athletics happen in the afternoon. But more importantly, allows the kids to have a lot more ice time than they're able to. And hopefully we can help them with their pursuit for post-secondary education. And, I talked to a lot of people. Barry Beck, those of you who watch the Rangers, a good friend of mine, he's running around in Asia right now. And the first thing he'll tell you is, should have never dropped out of high school, even though they made millions playing hockey. But to the point, we want to balance kids. We want to give kids the academics and their pursuit of their dreams, to do the sport that they love. So it's going well. We also started a basketball academy with Lake City Basketball in Penticton. And I think we have 9 or 12 kids in that as well. Yeah. So, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I think that's.
Okay, thank you for your time today.
I'm sure you'll have fruitful meetings with our staff this week.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, item 6 is a public comment opportunity. People have 2 minutes to speak on a non-development issue on the agenda. Do we have any pre-registered? No?
We don't, Your Worship, no.
Is there anybody on the phone who would like to comment? It doesn't sound that way, so we'll move on to item 7, business items and information services 5-year roadmap. The Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good afternoon, Council. I'm really pleased to provide Council with this overview of the IT assessment and roadmap that's been recently completed. And the Information Services team, the 5-year roadmap was a priority in 2020 for a work plan item. The GIS and IT team provide an essential service to the district and therefore require a plan to understand what we currently have, how best we can move forward to ensure that we have the appropriate security in place, the right infrastructure, and the ability to grow with our business needs over the next few years. So I am going to turn this over to our consultant, Michael Rogers, who will kind of go through the presentation with you. And then, of course, we're available for any questions should you have them after the presentation.
Mr. Mayor and honorable councillors, my name is Mike Rogers. I'm from a company called TMC, and somehow doing a summary report of an IT assessment doesn't seem as exciting as lighting up a grind and all the schooling stuff. So I'll try my best to make the subject seem just a little bit more lively, even though it is what it is. I guess I've got to drive this. So very quickly about TMC. Basically, we're a company that helps other companies to optimize their use of technology. We typically do that through conducting an assessment, which I'll cover in a moment, and then help organizations to develop a multi-year roadmap for increasing the value of their technology. Myself, I've been doing that almost exclusively for the last 15 years of an almost 100-year career. Just seems that way. So in terms of conducting the assessment, we typically come in and we look at every aspect of the IT estate. So we look at all of your infrastructure, we visit locations, we interview stakeholders within the organization. We conduct what's called a gap analysis. So we compare you to what we would consider peer organizations, so other municipalities, for example, and then also what we would call industry best practices. So looking at how you do something versus other organizations, and then come up with a profile in that regard. Interestingly, and I'll cover this in a little more detail, we also compile a risk assessment for you as an organization, with a focus on things that are likely to cause you problems in the future. So in the IT world, we call them SPOFs, single points of failure. So these are things, if you don't address them, for example, you've probably heard of stories where a few years ago with the British Airways, somebody forgot to do something and it took down their entire network globally. So it's those kinds of things that we look at. And then this develops into a multi-year roadmap. So what did we find? Like I said, it's not as exciting as a light up campaign, lots of red there. But I think it's sufficient to point out that what we're seeing from your IT infrastructure is the result of what we would call incremental investments. So over time, buying pieces, plugging them together without an actual strategy or a vision in terms of how those would serve the community. I think that the report that you got has more details in there, but I can give you some indication of what's behind these red indicators if you would like me to, or I can just continue and let you ask questions.
Just continue then. Yeah.
Okay, good. So the one that I would just point out, which I know councils don't like to hear this, but if I asked you to look at that matrix, which one would you think is the most important on that? And it's actually buried in the middle, and that's what you spend on your technology. So as an organization, you have been traditionally underspending the provincial average. So we look at what your peers in the province spend on capital investments in IT, you are way down. So the average there is about 0.7% of revenue. And in your best year in 3 years, you were at 0.4. The last few years, it was actually under 1.1%. And that's reflective in terms of what we're actually seeing, in the overall assessment. In terms of recommendations, there's a lot of things that will be in the plan, but these are the key things that I would like to recommend to the organization. So first and foremost is security. I don't know how many of you have followed, the number of municipalities in Canada and the US that have been hacked and held to ransom. So security is a very real issue, as we all know. And, the number one recommendation as an organization is to kind of test, fix, retest every single year, make it a priority from an investment perspective. The second piece, which kind of goes behind number one, and that's having an actual disaster recovery plan and infrastructure. So disaster recovery infrastructure is really, think of it as a second set of equipment that if somebody actually hacks into or breaks your primary systems, you have a backup place that you can restart your systems. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with the fact that there's a regional district that was recently hacked in your neighborhood. Ironically, I was actually doing an assessment with them as well, that honestly, that had nothing to do with the hack. But the thing is that, one of the things they found was they didn't have anywhere to rebuild their systems, so that slowed them down. So, that would be something that would be a priority for your organization. For an organization of your size, the third recommendation is really look at, I call it the fewer moving parts. You actually have a very complex infrastructure for a small organization and a small IT team. So, the plan starts to address that in terms of focusing on where can we take out complexity? Are there things that you could safely perhaps move to the cloud? And I'm not saying the cloud is, the best place to be, but you look at it from a cost perspective and a security, and perhaps look at offloading some of those things from your infrastructure. The fourth item, which is really critical, is completing the geospatial infrastructure upgrade. So this is your GIS system. You've completed an upgrade. This is really migrating all of the data and finishing that project. That's critical to the operation of your organization. In terms of number 5 is less exciting, just continuing to do privacy impact assessments. Most municipalities don't do them, even though they're required to do them. So that's something that the team is looking at. And then lastly, looking at your business systems. So when we looked at every single system that you use as an organization, typically there were issues from the business, things that they couldn't do, issues with vendor support, and so on. In the roadmap, which I'll get to in a moment, what we're recommending that you do is, get some skills to work with you to do like a business assessment, look at the processes, look at where there's actually cost optimization. We saw a number of areas where there were cost benefits for you to actually go in and re-architecting some of the systems that you're using. And then, critical to this is don't bite off the biggest thing you can. Look for some quick wins, which again have been identified for your IT department. And then just kind of continue down. You start with quick wins, do things that are a little more complicated, and then eventually you can tackle, the biggest systems that you have. Apologize for the really small writing. I do that so that nobody can actually read what's there, and they can't hold me accountable. No, trying to fit it all on one slide is tough. But what we recommend organizations like yourselves do is kind of adopt a thematic approach to your IT strategy for the next 5 years. So for this current year, your team has really been focusing on security. So improving and securing your enterprise. So making sure that you're not susceptible to being hacked like other organizations. They've already started standing up a disaster recovery environment. So that consists of some additional equipment, as I said, where if something happened and your systems failed, they could very quickly restart them. And then kind of going on year over year, next year, look at kind of boosting the performance, and then it continues there. I think in your detailed report, there is a recommendation on an annual basis in terms of what you should spend, or ideally you could spend from a CapEx perspective. But I think that's where I'll stop and then see if there's any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions from council? Councilman.
Thank you. Right now, we have some joint use situations. I think, please correct me where I am wrong, but with the school district, I think in our phone systems and different things, how is that working? Is that a cost saving situation to us, or is it archaic and something that needs to be retrofitted over time?
So there's a couple of issues specifically with that arrangement. One of them is that the school district is actually looking to stop doing that on kind of a regional basis. I actually ended up meeting with the IT manager, and it's not really an area of focus for them anymore. I believe that the IT manager at the regional district in Penticton, they're looking to see if they can take up some of that slack. So eventually that will become clear what's happening there. But to your specific question in regards to cost, yes, some of the things that you are paying for are probably easier to get now versus a few years ago at a savings. So our recommendation moving forward into next year is to really look at everything and see if you can get a better deal.
Thank you.
But just following up on that, in principle, in local government, is it beneficial to have a shared service with either another municipality, another regional district or school board or whatever, to work together on some of these things? Or have you found that everybody's just really better off sticking to their own organization?
Sure how to answer that, because I've been working in the IT industry for over 30 years, including in the public sector. And I mean, my professional view is that shared service arrangements can be very tough to make them work. The biggest obstacle is where you have an organization that takes the lead on that, and then perhaps through changes, it could be budgetary, people leaving, the focus shifts, and they no longer really want to do that. That tends to be the single factor that would kill that. But having said that, there are opportunities to partner with your local peers, and I think it's a great idea. So there's some, Karen and the IT team have a list of some of those where you could probably save money, improve your overall infrastructure, make it more reliable by partnering in specific areas. But typically I would recommend that I wouldn't necessarily take an all or nothing approach in that. Is look at it strategically. If it's something that you really need to keep in-house, keep it in-house. If it's something that makes sense to partner. If it's something that makes sense to outsource it to a vendor, then do that. But don't really kind of go all in on one strategy, because things can change.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councilor Barton.
Thank you. I was looking at your report that's in our agenda. It's more comprehensive than your presentation. And on page 8, there's a list of business applications assessments. And then I was kind of surprised to see at the very top, a big red circle, an X in it, BATM. For the, BATM is an accounting system. I mean, it's obviously not meeting your needs according to this report. And yet I know BATM to be very widespread, counter BATM everywhere. And they would, it's almost like they have no choice. What do you see as an option here on the sort of the poor performance? It's like the worst one on the list.
So in fairness, I actually know the co-founder of VATM personally, and VATM was a great solution a number of years ago, targeted for municipalities of your size, cost effective. Through a series of takeovers, they're now owned by a US company. They are not investing in the research and development that they should be investing in. You have a number of modules that you've paid for that they actually right out say they don't support anymore. Generally the feedback from your users, and in the last year I've done like 5 or 6 municipal assessments. It's the same across every one of them. They say that the support is bad. They've raised tickets for support in some cases 2 or 3 years ago, and they haven't had any feedback on that. So I think VATM is probably a solution that has had its day. Some people may not like to hear me say that, but I think it's fair to say that. There are other solutions that are out there. There's a couple that are Canadian companies. The real thing you would have to do is, the roadmap is do the business requirements, look at what it's costing you, what it doesn't do, and then kind of go and test the market and see, could you get a better solution? I think you can, it just, unfortunately, it's the one you invested in a number of years ago just isn't really going to last.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carlson.
Maybe not something that's directly on this report, but how about our website? Something we can fix, or does it need to be rebuilt in order to be functional to a way that is very user-friendly? Because I know right now it's a bit of a struggle to work around. Is that something that you looked at, or?
So not specifically in terms of the functionality of the website, but we looked at everything broadly. The good news is that you can fix anything in the IT world if you spend enough money. That's kind of the rule. There may be things, and that could be part of what we've recommended for next year, is getting someone in to look more specifically at the business needs, and then seeing, what would it take to revamp your website? Sometimes the things that have the biggest impact are the quickest and take the least amount of investment. So that would be part of the second phase, which would be looked at next year.
Thank you. Councillor Barton.
Another specific area that interests me, because I find it so incredibly useful, is our GIS system. And my understanding is that we do have a program investing in our GIS, and it is sort of mapped out what we want to do and what we're going to be doing. Yet it's on the list, maybe not entirely adequate. Where's the shortcomings there, and what can we do there?
So the shortcoming there is just really finishing the project that was started. So the system that you've migrated from and to, the GIS system you're using is actually, one of the best ones that is out there. A lot of municipalities use the same system, and it is based in Canada. I think they're based out of Vancouver. But there's some work still to be done to kind of complete that whole thing. And so doing that faster means that as an organization, you can look to maybe start to monetize more of those opportunities with your GIS system.
Okay, so we're on the right path.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's remember, when you look at that assessment, that's a point in time kind of a score. But, you go into the doctor and they do a blood test on you and say, oh, your blood sugar is over the roof, right? Well, that's a point in time. It may be because you just, chuck back a big, milkshake or something, and then, down the road when you do some changes, you'll see that actually it's really good and it's meeting your needs, right?
So I guess this is more for the corporate officer. So I'm just wondering, where we go from here. Will you take a look at the recommended roadmap and then come back to council with, I guess during budget, and with a plan? And that's the idea.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So that is the plan, is to really turn this into requests for budget. Next year, there's not a lot of budget asks. We've managed to take some of that low-hanging fruit that Michael has been talking about, but certainly there's always more that we can do. However, just with the capacity of our team, we really want to make sure that we're moving forward in an appropriate way so that we're not overwhelming the staff resources as well. So something like a BATM is kind of planning for that in a couple of years, because certainly that affects our whole organization. So our financial services team needs to kind of plan for that ahead of time. So the budget asks might not be there for next year, but certainly we are planning for certain projects, capital projects. And just on a note with the GIS, so we are having a GIS report coming to council on November 9th, just to give you an update on where that project is and to show you some of the new mapping features that have been put in place.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? No? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Moving on to item 7.3, bylaw services update. Director of Corporate Services.
Okay, council. So as we're shifting,
Sorry, do we need to? Oh, I guess we should receive that.
Receive for information.
Sorry about that. Councilor Van Elfen, second. Councilor Trainer, all in favor? Carried. Okay, now 7.3.
okay. Thank you, Worship. So as provided in the bylaw service update report, there have been a few changes since our work plan was presented to council in February of 2020, beginning with COVID-19 up to the retirement of our bylaw enforcement officer in August after 50 years at the district. So today I'd like to introduce you to Lucky Betty, our new bylaw enforcement officer and licensed inspector. He will talk a little bit about next steps for bylaw services, but first I just wanted to give you a quick review of the year thus far. So as you will see in some of the attached documents, the level of bylaw files created in 2020 year to date are very similar to 2019, with the exception of 179 COVID-19 related files. The high number of calls for the electrical bylaw reflect the tracking of meter reads that is done by our bylaw officer in support of our utility billing, and that's for move-in and move-outs throughout the month. Traffic and business licenses are next in the number of calls, and then we move below 100 for other types of files, those related to water utility, snow and ice, parks, zoning, and noise control. COVID-19 did require a bit of support from our bylaw services. Right at the beginning with the provincial health order, the provincial state of emergency, bylaw enforcement officers were seen as a natural support to our provincial health officer in ensuring that the orders were in place in all of our communities. So the role first was ensuring that businesses were not operating, so when things were closed down. Then when they were into the opening phase, just making sure that they were operating safely and within the guidelines. This initial coverage was provided by our bylaw enforcement officer and our casual bylaw officer. And later, when we started opening up our outdoor spaces, we created a bylaw park ambassador role to support the safety protocols outlined by the province. So the report from our park ambassador, Darren Krell, has been attached. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank him for stepping into a completely new role for the district and for educating and engaging with the public in such a positive manner. If you've had a chance to read the report, certainly Darren really embraced the opportunity and I think did a lot of value added for us in the community over the weekends and the time that he was with us. Darren was asked to be here today, but he actually works at the arena, his home position, so he wasn't able to make it today. So moving forward into the final months of 2020, we still have work to do. The unsightly premises calls, you'll notice, was at about 57. We actually found it was a quiet period between April and August, understandably. And so most of the calls were prior to that and then started again in August. So the Good Neighbor bylaw is still a very high priority for 2020, and I know it was a high priority for council for 2020 as well. We've attached a few documents to the update report related to the work that Lucky has been undertaking, and I'm going to let him speak a little bit about those things, and in particular, how the work that Lucky is doing is going to support really good customer service moving forward. Go ahead.
One second. Good afternoon, everyone. In regards to the main concern, first thing is we're going to look at the customer service aspect of it. We're going to be looking at, make sure we get in contact with the complainant within the first 48 hours of the receipt of the complaint, and then action the complaint within the first 5 days. So within the first week, it'll be actioned and they'll have a response back in regards to what action was taken in regards to that. And the second main thing is I want to move forward with a progressive enforcement approach. So that will start off with education, then lead to voluntary compliance, then of course enforcement action if needed. And in regards to that, I've also implemented an inspection report. So we can save time from sending letters out. We can issue the inspection report on site.
Great.
And of course, the Good Neighbor bylaw is work in progress. As drafts are being created. That's my end of it.
So just in closing, council, and certainly we're open to questions, both Lucky and I, but we have a recommendation to receive the report, but also 2 recommendations to direct staff to update our bylaw enforcement policy. So council has a policy that we've been looking at that just needs a few amendments here and there. And also to just continue the work and bring back a Good Neighbor bylaw draft that council can have a look at, and then talk a little bit about next steps with engaging the public. That concludes our comments.
Okay, thank you, and welcome Lucky to Summerland.
Thank you very much.
Lucky to have you. Councilor Barkwell.
Yes, thank you. Mayor, one question on the process. It sounded like the new process, the service standard 48 hours respond, that you would get back to the complainant about any action taken. But I think I read in the policy that we don't advise.
Yes, we'll be moving forward with that as well in regards to until the investigation is complete. That was my misspeaking of it. Until the investigation is complete, then we'll be notified of the actual verdict, basically, in regards to compliance action was taken or if not.
So yeah, just sort of a yes, no, we did something, we didn't do something, when everything is done.
Yes.
Okay, Councilor Carlson.
2 questions. The first one is, what did we give instead of an inspection report? Was there simply no notice handed out prior to, it was something recorded, brought back to City Hall, but not given to the?
From the experience I've noticed since I've been here, they were verbals.
Just verbal, okay. And the other one is, what is the complaint about a basketball hoop? It strikes me as the first thing on the list.
It'll be on something placed on the highway.
So if it's
on the street.
So if I put up a basketball hoop on the edge of my property facing out onto the street?
No, if it's on your property, it's okay.
Okay, you can play on the street, but the hoop has to be on your property.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So you're gonna have to move that.
I don't have one yet.
Any other questions? No? Then if I could get a motion to, there's several parts to this motion. This update, recommended motions, if anybody wants to bring something forward, Councilor Van Elfen.
As presented.
Okay, all right, so let's receive for information, bring forward a amendment at a future meeting, and to review a Good Neighbor bylaw at a future meeting. Second, Councilor Patton, any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We now move on to 7.4, the quarterly procurement report, and manager of procurement,
Hi.
So, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm just here to present on any procurement awards that were over $250,000 for the third quarter of 2020. So that's in accordance with the procurement policy that we passed a while back. And in this quarter, we just had one, which I think you're all quite familiar with already. That was the landfill administration services contract for the landfill to Whistle Waste Solutions. So the first 2 years of the contract are estimated at about $629,000, and there's an opportunity to renew for an additional 3 years. Did anyone have any questions?
Don't see any. As mentioned, we've discussed this already. So no questions. Anybody like to bring forward to receive for information? Councilor Carlton, Councilor Trainer, all in favor? That's carried. That's it.
Thank you very much.
7.5, the Policy Library Framework. And I'll turn this over to our CIO.
Thank you, Your Worship. During 2020, and most recently with the COVID-19 pandemic, there's been a need to develop a number of policies to ensure clarity of action for council, the community, and of course staff. Council created policy number 120-20, electronic meeting, public participation, as an example in terms of new policy that need to be created during this time. Where there is need for clarity, consistency, and direction, various levels of policy are an effective tool for communication and achieving a desired outcome of council or at the staff level. Council policies generally have the following characteristics, such as approved by council, guiding council decisions, conveying a common understanding of council's strategic direction, related to the District of Summerland's governance, service levels, and programs, impacts for the community, council's jurisdiction, content not necessarily covered elsewhere or cannot be covered elsewhere within the district, and guidance decisions to achieve consistent outcomes and common interpretation. Administrative level policies share common characteristics such as corporate policy approved or endorsed by the CEO, focused on internal administration and operations within the district, primarily informing the impacts of employees and overseeing contractors, providing consistency, clarity of interpretation, and directing or guiding management and the staff for consistent outcomes. As part of the work plan within corporate services and the district staff, there's been a focus on the creation and review of bylaws, policies, processes, and procedures. To provide consistency across the organization, guidelines, templates, and policy evaluation tools have been created. With regards to the report in front of council, the creation of a policy library or council policy library is a way to distinguish between current district policies and further inform and develop an administrative policy library. Corporate services are intended to act as the administrator of the policy libraries, ensuring consistency through the templates, numbering, and ordering of policies as they're reviewed, evaluated, developed, amended, and or rescinded. The information that's provided in front of council comes forward with a recommendation that council support proposed council policy library number 100.21, which outlines the framework and criteria to guide council and staff in the development and review of policy. Should council support the draft new policy under the proposed framework, the 800 personnel policies, which are currently on the website, would be realigned and fall under administrative authority, allowing senior management to create, amend, or rescind these under the direction of the CEO. Using policy evaluation tools, the exception to the realignment of these policies would be the two policies referenced in the report regarding the Christmas closure policy and the CEO performance evaluation. Should council support staff recommendation, it's recommended that the 800 personnel files outlined in the recommendation be rescinded as council policy, with the CEO approving each of these policies as part of the administration policy library. So the attachment to the report outlines the proposed policy, and I'm happy to answer any questions the council may have. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the scale? No discussion. Anybody like to bring the motion forward? Councilor Van Alphen.
As presented.
Okay, so that's to receive the report for information to adopt the new governance model and to rescind the 800 personnel policies. So 800 policies, subsections. I'll second Councilor Trainer. Any discussion? Councilor Barton.
Yeah, we've got in the report with that, they proposed changes, say, to the policy for bylaw enforcement. Now, it's just, we're not like approving these changes at this time here. This is just something that's going on because we haven't had any discussion of these changes and such.
Sorry, Counselor, do you see that in the list, or?
Yeah, it's proposed amendments, followed bylaw enforcement, which one did I touch? It's item 5.
I think it may have been the previous report where council directed staff to bring back an amendment to that policy.
So 5.
Oh, yeah, look at the previous report. Okay. So then, all right, so this, okay, now I've mixed up all these policy things. Okay, now I'm with you because I was looking at policies and things. All right, thank you.
Okay. Councilor Van
Policy number 800.21, hiring practice of pensioners. There's no hope in hell for me. Just kidding.
No comment.
Not yet. Will though.
Definitely need a policy on that. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. So 8.1, this is adoption of the permissive tax exemption bylaw that we discussed at the last meeting. That's just brought for adoption. Councilor Trainer, second. Councilor Carlson, any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Now I need a be a public media comment period. 2 minutes per speaker. Did we get any pre-registered? Is anybody on the telephone who would like to comment? Any member of the public? All the press that's watching. No? Okay, so move on for a resolution to close the meeting to the public. Councilor Van Elfen, second. Councilor Carlson, all in favor? Carried.